Time for our next session. This one is entitled, put glasses on, Living Assets, Evolutive NFTs for Playing Fair in the Metaverse. And we're with Alun Evans. Alun Evans, CEO and co-founder of Freeverse IO, the home of living assets. Alun, over to you.
Thank you very much.
Questions at the end, hopefully. Let's see how.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. That's the very last slide, not the very first one. But you can contact me if you like, it's fine. All right, lovely, thank you. Okay, good. So, yesterday I went for breakfast, right, down at Pike's Place Market. And there was a store down there called the Crumpet Shop. And me being British, I was very delighted. I thought, I'm going to have a crumpet for breakfast. And I was even more delighted to see that you could put on top of your crumpet my favorite condiment, which of course is Marmite, right? So I was delighted to see that even on this side of the pond, they have, you know, they've got Marmite. They've seen the light. But the reason I'm mentioning it, right, is because Marmite have this very successful advertising campaign in the UK at least, which is very based of love it or hate it, right? And the whole NFT world is a bit of a Marmite thing in the games industry now, isn't it? Let's face it, right? So on the right-hand side, there's like all this billions of dollars that have been spent on NFTs, right, in the last year, 18 months. I've seen this figure higher in other things, right? And on the left is an image that was shared on like a WhatsApp group for developers in Barcelona in Spain, where I live. And with this Terminator, like, your parents are dead, you know. It's like the games developers, especially the indie games developers to a certain extent, they're still really suspicious of NFTs. And so, and I wanted to address that a little bit today, and the reasons why I think that is, and the way I think I'm piggybacking a little bit on what Daniel was talking about, what makes sense for the future. And I was going to start, you know, by actually talking about NFT. And so what is an NFT, right? Okay, well, we're all here at this session. Maybe we know what an NFT is. But I'm going to start by saying what an NFT is not. And I think it's very important to understand what an NFT isn't, right? So in the popular zeitgeist, people think an NFT is an image. No, it's not, right? An image can be associated with an NFT, but an NFT is not an image. An NFT is not a guarantee of IP rights. There was this wonderful headline. These guys bought an NFT. I think it might have been, it was either the text of Lord of the Rings or Dune. It was Dune, right? The book of Dune. And they thought that by buying an NFT with the text of Dune, it guaranteed them the metaverse rights for Dune, right? And they thought they were going to build, like, you know, Dune in the metaverse. And of course, it didn't guarantee that at all, right? You know, just because you have an NFT of, you know, Dune or whatever video game you like, it doesn't give you any IP rights unless that's specifically associated with the NFT itself. Some people think an NFT is a receipt of purchase. I kind of have sympathy with that view, in the sense that if you own an NFT, you guaranteed you have bought it, right? But it's not a receipt. It is its own item. And the other thing I think is worth mentioning is that NFTs aren't necessarily bad for the environment. There are applications of blockchain that are bad for the environment, right? Proof of work is bad for the environment. But I think we're moving beyond that now in terms of, like, you can't blame all of blockchain technology and NFTs for you know, polluting our planet. So what? Okay, that's what an NFT is not. So what is an NFT, right? And that's it. That's an NFT. Yeah, boring. And what I don't like about NFTs, modern NFTs as well, is that an NFT is usually now this, right? A bad NFT. It's like an ID, a number, which is unique, right? It's an owner, right? So me, who knows me? Well, I'm 0x whatever I am. And then it's a link to some private server.com, yeah? And this is true. If you look at a number of NFTs, you will find that this is actually the NFT, right? And the data associated with that NFT is stored on some private server.com, right? And if that private server gets hacked, or if it gets taken down, or it breaks, then all the data associated with that NFT, your precious NFT that you spent 69 million euros on, dollars, how much the people thing went for, that disappears, right? And there are plenty of NFTs out there that are like that. And I don't think that's very sustainable or very safe for the future. And I don't think a lot of people realize that. So What's a good NFT? Well, this is a better NFT, right? So I have my ID, I have my owner, and then I have some properties that are stored on-chain. So anyone can go to the chain and certify on-chain and say, okay, well, the name of this NFT is Bob. What does Bob do? He's a builder, right? How old is he? He's the answer for everything in the universe, yeah? And associated with that NFT is some other decentralized way of associating data with it, right? In this case, it's the IPFS, the Interplanetary File System, yeah? So you can associate an image and perhaps even some terms and conditions or a license of use in another decentralized way. And this is a very healthy NFT because anyone going to the underlying chain can now see exactly what they're buying. And too few NFTs are like this in my experience. So that's not so relevant. Licenses we talked about. It's very interesting how, Daniel was talking about CryptoKitties, right, and Dapper Labs earlier on. And I think it was fascinating with CryptoKitties that when you bought a CryptoKitty, the license said very explicitly that you were not allowed to print out the image of your CryptoKitty at above a certain resolution. I can't remember what it was, and maybe Daniel will correct me later on, right? But I think it was something like you can't print it out higher than A4, right? And so I think that's very, very important, and it actually is important for game creators to realize that they can associate a license and terms and conditions with an NFT. And I was speaking to a game studio a few months ago, and they were really worried, this idea of, if we sell an NFT of some asset in our game, does that give the IP to the NFT owner? And I was like, no, it doesn't. Not necessarily, not unless you want it to, right? So I think, associating terms and conditions with an NFT is very, very important in the games industry going forward. So why would you want to own one, right? Okay, fine. We've talked about collectibles, right? But I think beyond collectibles, there are other reasons, the fairer reasons, that you might want to own an NFT. This is a picture of my bike, right? I'm a big mountain biker. I don't collect bikes, right? But I do ride them. And if I buy my bike, I am allowed to sell it to anyone I want for any price that we agree, yeah? That's the way the world works. That's the way economy works in the real world, right? So I should be able to do that with my digital content as well. I believe that very strongly, right? If I buy something in-game, why shouldn't I be allowed to sell it onto somebody else? And that's not the case at the moment. That's not the case because for all sorts of reasons we can go on after the session, maybe talk about why that's not the case. But usually when you buy something in a game, you can't trade it. You can trade it for in-game virtual currency or soft currency or something, but you can't sell it for real money. And in fact, there's a whole network of the gray market of games that you might have seen, right? Whether it's game flip or player auctions. Maybe you've bought World of Warcraft gold on eBay in the past at some point. And so gamers obviously want to do this. They want to be able to trade their in-game assets for some real value beyond their in-game tokens. In fact, there was a study done by a university in Korea a few years ago that estimated that about 20% of the annual game spend is actually hidden away in these gray markets, right? Where you're not technically allowed to do this trading, but you're doing it. So there is definitely a desire for gamers to do this trading of in-game items, right? And now with NFTs, we have the technology to do it. But so far, all we've seen is collectibles, right? And I think, can we bring NFTs bind them more tightly into what really is game assets in general? And that's something that in Freeverse we want to talk about, want to do. We want to talk about that in a bit. And then there's this thing. I looked online, pictures of the Metaverse, and this is what I found, right? Who knows what the Metaverse is? It's everything, right? It's everything Web3. My take on it is that if everyone has an idea of the Metaverse, and you're all right. Yeah, all of us are correct. Whatever's in your head, that is the Metaverse. It's this linking of things. And I think, this idea of ownership, I think, is a really key binding element of what the Metaverse will be, right? And Web3 technologies and ownership, and I agree completely what Daniel was saying earlier on about how ownership is a very key element and will be a key element of the Metaverse beyond Mark Zuckerberg with his fancy goggles, right? And then there is this element of collecting, right? And play to earn gaming and play and earn gaming. And that's obviously there. But I do think there's a there's an argument there which is made by my colleagues in my WhatsApp group, in the indie games WhatsApp group in Barcelona, right? Is this play and earn model is kind of a little bit, it relies, it's not a bubble, I wouldn't call it a bubble, but I would call it a pyramid, yeah? Because at the end of the day, if you get in early, right, and you buy your NFTs early, you want to make money out of them, right? So you're speculating on that value. And you're only going to do that when there is this constant flow of new users at the bottom of the pyramids. And in every single play and earn application that we've seen so far, right, eventually this flow has dried up, right? And I had the picture of Axie earlier on, and the last time I showed this slide, Axie was still riding sky high, and I was saying, it's the exception that proves the rule. But it's not. It's the exception. It's not the exception. It's the rule that proves the rule, right? Axie is now suffering a little bit as well because the flow of new users is drying up, right? And when that flow of new users dry up, then the value of the thing you're selling is gonna go down, right? If all you're doing is collecting and speculating. So, what I'm really interested is how can we bring real value to NFTs in the future, to digital content in general in video games, right? And this is what we do at Freeverse. We talk about dynamic or evolutive NFTs. We call them living assets in Freeverse. This idea where what the gamer does with their NFT directly affects its value on the marketplace, right? Because you're changing the NFT based on how it's being used. The same way that you would change a regular asset in a game, right? The same way that you've upgraded your sports car and put a better engine into it, right? Then that means that you've changed its utility and therefore its value to another person, right? And therefore its value is based on what you've done with it. And if you do that, it changes this passive activity of collecting items into this active methodology of engaging with your users and your assets in the game, right? And I think we call this living assets, right? Some people call it dynamic NFTs. Some people call it evolutive NFTs. But it's the idea of adding real value based on what the user does with the NFT, right? And here's some examples, right? So the sports games are a classic example, right? So you buy a player in a sports game, or it could be a car in a car racing game, and you buy it for a certain price. And if it were a static NFT, it just stays that. And the price is based on how rare it is. Well, big deal. But if you play with that asset and you train that player so they're fitter and faster and stronger, or you put a new engine in the car, or you upgrade the wheels or the tires or whatever it is, then the value of that asset is going to be higher based on what you've done with it. Yeah? And that's play to earn done right. Yeah? That's not play to earn based on speculation. That's play to earn based on I'm putting my time and effort into improving this asset. Those of us of a certain age will remember Tamagotchis, right? And perhaps with fond memories, right? And the idea, what an amazing retention mechanic. They nailed retention right then there, 15, 20 years ago, right? You have to come back and feed your virtual pet X many times a day, or it will die. But if you can, with living asset NFTs, you can bring that Tamagotchi mechanic into a video game, right? You can say, come back and train your assets, otherwise it will lose value. You're losing money unless you come back and engage with your NFT. And we made a game back in the days as a sort of a test version of our technology. And we're not a game studio. We didn't make much. It was a really cool game, but it was a sports game, management game. And your players, your football players, right? Soccer, sorry, we're on the wrong side of the pond. Your soccer players, unless you came back and trained them every day, they would get fat. Literally in 3D, they would get fatter. It was kind of cool. And as a result, we had sky-high retention values because it was a good game. It was a fun game to play as well. But the users came back because they didn't want to lose the value of their NFTs. And they didn't even realize they were NFTs, right? They were just assets in their game. And so, that Tamagotchi mechanic is very, very powerful. The creator economy, there's been lots of talk about the creator economy of games that enable users to create and customize an asset, right? Why shouldn't that be an NFT? Why shouldn't you be able to sell it on to somebody else for real value? With static NFTs, it gets very expensive to do that, right? It gets extremely expensive to upgrade and overwrite the properties on the blockchain. And so with living assets, like it's a natural fit of having users to be able to create and customize. If I buy a car, you know, I'm going to change the color of my red Ferrari to pink. Someone might want a pink Ferrari. Someone might not. It doesn't matter what the value is. The value is decided on what I do with it, right? And so this customization and creation is very, very powerful. So, you know, user actions are really important to, we think at least in Freeverse, about how they should affect the properties and therefore the market value. We think it's fairer. It's a fair representation in games in the metaverse of what NFTs could and should be. And if you're a game developer, then having these evolutive, dynamic, living asset NFTs is a way of not just monetizing in a different way. I think we're all sort of finding our ways, like what is the best way of monetizing NFTs beyond that initial drop, but also of driving retention, right? Because you can use these mechanics to help bring your players back in. So that's what we do at Freeverse, right? We have our layer 2 solution, which can be plugged into several different blockchains. We're in Polygon right now. We're moving to Hedera soon, or we're simultaneously deploying on Hedera soon, maybe Solana as well. It means that the NFTs can evolve. It's incredibly scalable. We can create millions of NFTs at very, very low cost. You know, trading in every token you want, and fiat currencies as well. And of course, one thing we haven't even mentioned is this idea of recurring revenue, right? So another interesting monetization strategy is, of course, you can charge a percentage on the second-hand trades, not just on those first drops, which is an interesting business model too. So we do that at Freeverse, and it's highly scalable. We can do it literally millions of NFTs, and so you can gift NFTs away for free, right? So you can literally give your players NFTs. So we're moving away from this idea of rarity and expensive NFTs. Like, I'm going to give you an NFT for nothing. It's literally worthless. And your job as the gamer is to increase its value. That's real vision. That's the real future, I think, of NFTs in the gaming industry, giving the power to the gamer to directly control the value of the NFTs. That's what we do at Freeverse. We have a booth out there where myself and my colleague Nacho are out there, and happy to chat to you or later on in the ping pong tournament, wherever we're going to play it. And so, thank you very much, and I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Alun, we've got it's NFTs, mate. Come on, we've got to have a question. Microphone's right there. First hand up in the room. Help yourself.
So do you have any advice for game makers to maybe fight the urge of power creep or perhaps dilution of their NFTs?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting question. And I like to use the Spider-Man quote here, right? With great power comes great responsibility, right? If you are given the power to enable your gamers to control the value of the NFTs, then you have the responsibility to do that, to look after it very carefully. I think the biggest challenge for a game maker is in your game economy now, how do you deal with this concept of a permanent item, right? Most game economies, especially in the free-to-play game economies, are very built around this idea of how can I use the resources, right? It's a resource management metagame, if you like, right? But now with NFTs, you're bringing in this permanent asset. And if it's a permanent asset that can be evolved and changed, how is that going to impact your game design, your economy design? I don't know, right? That's a question that needs to be trialed with game designers, I think. This is all such a new field, right? And the idea of introducing these permanent assets into a game is going to be like, right now, we've seen it work as collectibles, but I do think there's much greater potential if they're brought more into the core game engine, but that will affect the game economy. I think that needs to be very carefully looked at.
Thank you.
One more question. We're going to keep things moving, Ray.
Alrighty.
But by all means, anybody in the room, catch up with Alan afterwards. I'm sure we'll be happy to answer your questions.
I had a question about the perceived value of NFTs. A lot of the times, when you put an NFT out there, the community creates its value, creates its worth. You're saying just putting the NFTs out there for free that basically have no value, and expecting the community to put the time in to increase the value? How do you actually get that perceived value created if it's free to begin with?
Yeah, I think you take a concrete example, right? Let's imagine you give an NFT away. It's a car, right, in a car racing game, and it's free. So you start playing the game, and you get a free car. How does the user assign value to that asset, right? Forget about the fact it's an NFT. Just think of it as a regular game asset. Well, okay, if everyone at the start of the game has the same basic car, what can I do to assign it value? I'm from Wales in the UK. I might paint it with a Welsh dragon, right? Somebody else who's Welsh would then pay for it, right? Because they're paying for the time and effort that I put in creating that, in decorating it with my patriotic colors. If I want to assign real value to it, then maybe I'll play the game, use some other free-to-play mechanic to gain points within the game, some soft currency, might spend that soft currency on upgrading the engine, right? And then I have a more powerful car. So the value is being created based on my actions as a gamer, rather than just how rare it is. Does that make sense?
Yeah, can I ask a quick question? So, in terms of the add value, right? Totally get that. In all of your experience, even if it wasn't perfect execution, what is the best example that you have seen of someone really going with that whole build, the Tamaguchi / urn, like where it really was deeply ingrained in building out a value system around it?
Yeah, the best example that I would mention is the game that we created, Gold Revolution, where we had day 30 retention values of over 40%, right? Because that was a concrete example of users coming back to play the game because it was a fun game, but they didn't want to lose the value of their portfolio. When they were trading their NFTs in the in-game marketplace, they were doing so based on value that they had added to it. So I think that sky-high retention value was like a real case in point of this is how value can be generated here.